guys, it's Kelly. Hey, I got another page done in my art journal, my mini art journal. I used a new box that I got that I recently did a video on. So wanted to dive into that and do another page with that stuff. So kind of vintage feel, and I love dragonflies. So it's from Your Creative Studio. I got that box. It was a February kit, and I wanted to kind of dive into there and use some of the ephemera and the papers and all the fun stuff that I got in there. So I wanted to use some of that paper. So that paper is really pretty. It's kind of it's like a vellum paper, but it's got a design on it. It's really pretty once you get it glued down to the paper. It's a real subtle background. It's like an instant background, and I really, really loved how that turned out, and I wanted to make sure I used that. So a lot of ephemera from here, a lot of the paper, and some stamping done in this. But those papers there, I chose the dragonfly because I just love them. But you could get like so much out of this pack. And again, I always tell you guys the kits that you can invest in, you get a lot of bang for your buck with those. That's such a great place to start if you're trying to get into art journaling. So I decided I wanted that dragonfly, and I fussy cut that out. The paper isn't too thick, so you do have to be kind of careful with it. But again, it's an art journal, so it doesn't matter the thickness of the paper or things like that. You can put whatever you want on an art journal page. You don't have to overthink it. You just have to do it. So sped that up and left the fussy cutting in there. It really doesn't. It's very forgiving. You don't have to cut it right up to it. You can leave some white on it, and I like to leave a little bit of the background on it so that I can ink it. And you can cut it as close as you want. This one I wanted a little bit closer than usual because I wanted to use just the shadow of the excess that you cut out, if that makes sense. So I do wind up inking all of that in the end. But it's a super cool dragonfly, and he is the focal point on there. So I knew I was going to put some purple flower in the dragonfly and the background, but the extra little papers, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I just started playing with all the ephemera that was in the box and just made some simple choices. Didn't overthink it. Took some of the papers and just cut pieces of it. I fussy cut another piece of that paper, but it just wasn't working with the layout, so it didn't make the cut. It's a little pink flower with another bug on it. I might use that for something else. It only took a second to fussy cut it out, so I'll probably use that on another page. So I'll just put it in my box of ephemera. Every time I make a page, I get something that didn't make the cut, so I hang on to those and I revisit them later. So I cut one of those pieces of ephemera and I just tucked it, instead of using it the way that it came, I just cut it into smaller pieces and then made my own kind of like collage with it. And then I liked some of the text that was above that dragonfly, so I decided to use that as well. And I didn't overthink it. I could have gone crazy and kept adding new things, but there was so much going on in the background and a bunch of little hints that were happening, and I really liked it. So I just looked for my sentiment, and I chose, I think it says like, do what makes your soul shine. And it definitely fit for my page because I was just wanting to create something pretty. And art journaling is good for the soul. So again, I don't write anything on mine. It's the process of creating that is the therapy for me. And right here, I'm showing you guys again, I've done this several times in my videos. So the piece of acetate that comes on the back of your stamps, instead of fighting with it, just take some tape and glue it down so you can lift it off and you don't lose it. When I wasn't doing this as my normal practice, sometimes the acetate would wind up, I couldn't find it later, or it'd wind up getting thrown in the garbage, and not good. I needed it. So yeah, if you're not doing that, Scotch tape your acetate piece to your stamps, your cling stamps, and it'll make your life a lot easier. So that's just, again, some of the papers from the kit, and I just took my sentiment and stamped it on one of those and cut it down. And I decided to use archival. I wasn't sure if I was going to put my decoupage over the top of this as well. I wound up not doing that. It wasn't really necessary. But just in case I wanted to use some wet medium, I stamped my sentiment on that paper in archival ink, and it was blue archival ink. I thought that would go kind of complement the purpley blue flowers that I had in there. So yeah, just cleaning off my stamp, putting it back where it goes, makes my life easier. Stamp chamois. I hear a lot about those. I don't have one. I can see how that would make sense, but I don't know how that would be different from me just cleaning off my stamps with my microfiber towel. There are some times when little pieces get on my stamps. So, question for those of you that have used a stamp chamois, let me know in the comments below if that saves you guys from all the little boogers on your stamps and makes for a clean stamp. What's the benefit? Sell me on the benefit of a stamp chamois instead of a just regular microfiber towel. Yeah, let me know what you guys think. Always love your feedback on that. So I just got my straight edge, my metal ruler, and I started to just kind of tear that because I thought, oh, it'd be kind of cool to have it uneven. But the sentiment itself is quite large for the small area that I had. It's my pages in my book are 4.5 by 5, or 5.5 by 4.25, just a standard A2 size card basically. So I made it a little bit larger this time. But this panel that I have is going to be short. It's a little smaller. So it's about 3.25 by 5. So that sentiment's pretty large. So I really didn't have a whole lot of room to move around on that. So after tearing it and everything, that's a great option to do. But I just need to get pretty close because that sentiment's pretty big for this space. It winds up working out really well, but yeah, I couldn't get, I don't know, the texture that I guess I could have, but it wasn't worth it. So once I got the layout the way I liked it, I took a picture of it. And then I decided that with vellum, you can always see the glue behind it. But if the entire thing is glued, then you won't be able to see it so much. So what I opted to do was to go ahead and take my my really, really cheap decoupage and brush it all over the entire background and then cover the entire thing with decoupage. So Mod Podge, whatever, whatever you want to use, but, or, any kind of mixed media medium would work too, a clear medium. So any of that would work. The cheapest option, I always like to kind of reach out to newbies or people who might be on a budget. There's nothing wrong with Mod Podge or the generic version of Mod Podge. Just use it. It's the same thing. It's usually not as good as the ones that are a little bit pricier, but it's just an art journal. If you're going to commission pieces and things like that, then that's obviously different, and you wouldn't even be watching my videos probably. But yeah, take the cheap route. So if the whole thing is glued, then you won't be able to tell the difference between one part or the other. It'll all look the same, and it worked out very, very well. So I just used my brayer just to evenly distribute it and make it, all stick evenly. But what wound up happening as the glue, because I put it on pretty thick, as the Mod Podge underneath, decoupage, whatever you want to call it, as it dried underneath, it did have these little ripples in there. And I was okay with that because that's just more texture in the background. I was fine with it. So once it dries more, you might be able to see it. I actually tried to ink over it to kind of highlight them too because it's like a ripple effect that happened. And I liked it. But instead of cutting it with scissors, I wanted to have it a nice straight line. So I brought out my Tim Holtz cutter, my guillotine cutter. I love that thing. I use it for pretty much everything. Anytime I need a straight line cut. And I just cut off the excess, and I will hang on to those because I could use those in other projects. That vellum is really pretty. Very, very subtle design in the background. Makes it perfect for a background. And then once I got all the excess cut off, I had to assemble the card. But before I did that, I would need to ink all the ephemera pieces, and I needed some text in the background like I always do. I love that. I think it really helps everything come together. And there's my microfiber towel that I use for pretty much everything. So again, sell me on the chamois. Sell it to me. And then I'm just drying my ink from my stamping, and I use the cobalt blue again in archival, just allowing me options if I wanted to seal the whole top of it so it wouldn't smear. And again, I opted out of it, but it was an option. So I'm using archival ink. It's in potted soil is the color that I'm going to use. If I used the usual distress ink with the vintage photo, which I do love, it was going to smear a little bit, and I didn't want that to happen. So I'm just using my white Jelly Roll pen to mark that sponge to say that it's an A for archival. And so sorry, I got interrupted on my over. Mark the sponge A for archival and then PS for potted soil. So I will be able to identify that sponge and use it again in the future. So just using my favorite glue just to put everything in its permanent home. I like to leave a little bit of glue from the edges in case later on I want to tuck something in underneath each piece. It leaves me those options as a possibility. And this was just, it came together pretty simple. It's a really simple design. It's not too busy, but all the papers and things had all kinds of fun stuff happening on them. So those flowers in that package, I thought that they were stickers too. Turns out they're not. If they are, I couldn't get the back off of them, so I just said forget it. I put glue on it and added it to the project and called it done. But I really love those flowers that come in that kit from your creative studio. Beautiful, beautiful kit. If you're into vintage, you would really love it. If vintage is not your jam, it's probably not the best kit for you, but you do you, whatever you want. Now I want to add some black splatter marks. So I just use my black gosh, I can't talk, acrylic paint. And I just used my hand to cover the sentiment because I didn't want it to get muddy up with any of the splatters. So I thought it might make it a little too dirty looking. So I just covered it with my hand and wiped it off. So it works. Didn't have to overthink it. And I didn't want it on the dragonfly because I wanted that to be front and center as my focal point. So I didn't want to put any splatter marks on that. So yeah, I'm liking how that's turning out. It's got a little bit of shine from those flower acetate paint, but you know, it works. Shine doesn't really go, but I tied it together in the end after I put the dragonfly down. I decided to use to add some sparkle to the wings, and I put some wing castella on the wings, and I thought it wound up tying it together nice, and it wound up making sparkle work. Vintage and sparkle don't usually go together, but I made it happen. Made it happen. So yeah, simple design. I like it. And you can use that same layout. It's kind of like a card layout if you think about it. You can just put, you know, two pieces of ephemera down, your sentiment, your focal point, and embellish on the side. So it's kind of a recipe for success. And in my book, I decided to use the black paint to create a frame around my page in my book. Because again, this page that I made was 3 3/4 by 5. So it's, you know, a 1/4 inch all the way around. So I just painted the outside before I put it in my book and called it done. Had to dry it, of course. I'm really liking how the book is coming together. I'll throw some different styles in there and the different signatures too. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, but when I start overthinking it, it becomes not as fun. So each page is its own little creation. So I don't want to start making rules for art journaling because then again, it takes away from the fun. But there it goes. I love the black frame around it. And it's just, you just slap it down there and it allows me to have the wings, you know, go beyond the page. And I really like how that looks. And I just glue it in its permanent home. There really isn't, this is mostly flat. There is basically no dimension on this one whatsoever. And I usually like to add some dimension or some moving pieces or something. And I'm kind of liking this one. Came together pretty easy. Just gluing down the last little pieces. Putting it in its home. And as I was looking at it, the sparkle from the flowers, like I was saying earlier, the sparkle from the flowers, I was like, it kind of makes it look like it wasn't meant to be. But if I make the wings a little sparkly, it's hard to see in the video, but if I make the wings a little sparkly, then it makes sense. It kind of ties it together a little bit better. I could have probably done some on the frame too, but it was just too much. It's, you know, no one to quit. So there, again, you can't really see it too well, but it's there and it makes sense when you see it in real life. So, and I need to make sure that dries pretty good. So I left that open I hope you guys like it. I hope it inspires you guys to go make a page really quickly. So thank you so much for watching, and definitely leave me some comments. I'd love to hear from you guys. If you think there's, you have any suggestions, share them. And do videos, guys. Share your skill with us. So just make sure to like, comment, and share if you liked it, and I'll have more to come soon.